Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is K McBriarty. She is here to celebrate tales from Under the Sycamore Tree. Before we invite MK into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by DareToDreamBook.com. Have you always wanted to be an author? Do you know that your voice and message matter? They do. Do you have an inspirational story of how you found the courage to reconnect with a long-lost goal or dream? Then visit DareToDreamBook.com. Become part of this unique, collaborative, multi-author book project and fulfill your dream of becoming an author and getting your message out to the world. Our good friend G. Brian Benson is part of this project and is really looking forward to helping you make your dream come true. Check it out today, DareToDreamBook.com. Join us right now from the beautiful state of New Jersey. Our guest is here today to celebrate her book. It's called Birds in the Backyard, Tales Under the Sycamore Tree. Please welcome to the show, K McBriarty. Hey, MK, how are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me on the show today.
I'm delighted to have you on the show. Tell us all about Under the Sycamore Tree, please.
Well, a couple of years ago, my father put a bird feeder in the backyard, and we were just amazed of all the different kind of birds and the activity that took place with this bird feeder. And of course, I'm coming from an environmental background. My bachelor's in environmental policy, and I was always an avid outdoor person. And I was just mesmerized by these birds that I had never seen come into this yard, and this breeding frenzy that took place because of this bird feeder. And I thought, wow, this would make a really interesting story.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it kind of emerged from that.
Well, I know when you first reached out, one of the things that I was really excited about is that we live here in the city of Boston, but we are on the very outskirts of the city, and our property borders a wildlife sanctuary. So we have been blessed to live on this piece of property that just has thousands of birds flying through and calling home, and we're on we seem to be on a migration highway, because twice a year, in the spring and in the fall, we'll go out and there will literally be thousands and thousands of birds kind of chilling in, it's like a rest stop. It's like one of the rest stops on the Jersey Turnpike, our backyard, and birds come out and they hang for an hour or so, and you can't hear yourself think. There's so much chatter going on between all these thousands of birds. And then when they get all rested, it's time to leave, and they all pick up and take off together, and we'll see them the next season.
And what's kind of interesting, though, is because you have the kind of plants and the kind of habitat that they like. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, most suburban areas, what we did is when we urbanized it, we took away all their foods. And we're like, well, why aren't the birds here? Well, because we don't have what they want to have. We don't have what's called indigenous plants. And most of us don't know what indigenous plants are, because we're not botanists, and we're not, I didn't even know it. I was researching the book. And so we kind of lure them out with this bird food. We kind of coax them out. But it's only for a little while. Once the bird food runs out, of course, the birds find their way back to the more sustainable food. So the birds in the book decide that they can't do this long term, and they decided to create their own bird sanctuary. And when researching this, I actually met with a botanist friend of mine from college, And I was just amazed of all the things that are out there that attract birds. And we actually, when we were taking photos for the book, we actually visited these bird sanctuaries with these flowers and saw birds dwelling and living in it. And it was a great eye-opening experience for us.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about that. Say, we have lots of folks who listen in the Northeast of the United States, where both you and I live. What kind of indigenous plants can we go out and bring to our backyards or our windows that might attract some birds?
Well, that's an excellent question. One of the things that we found was something as basic as a sunflower. And depending on where you are, indigenous plants are going to be different. So one of the suggestions that they had, this was actually by the Audubon Society, was take a patch in your yard and just let it grow. And things will pop up, and things people call weeds, but things that are just kind of like land there. And that is what they call indigenous plants. And we don't know. Go to your garden center or local garden center, and they will tell you. You know, we mentioned coneflowers in the book, and something as basic as thistle, which is actually, I found, I'll be hiking, I'm like, oh, that's like a little weed. But the birds love it. And that bird food, if you actually look at the bird feeder, that's actually considered in the bird food feeder. And that actually attracts the finches. Another suggestion that they used was milkweed. That attracts the butterflies, different types of milkweed. I actually bought my parents were in the backyard, and I actually suggested that they try evening primrose, for the nighttime pollinators. But, we've been seeing a lot of that in my father's backyard. It can be something as simple as putting a bush, like a nice bush, because birds like to hide out in bushes and trees. So it doesn't always have to be flowers. It can be something as simple as a nice tall bush that they could make a nest in.
Yeah, yeah. We've had the pleasure of a few times robins nesting in our bushes and laying their eggs, and the babies come and we watch them, and it is simply fascinating. One of the things that I'm blown away by is I remember one summer the family came and the birds were hatched and they lived and then they moved on, and then when they left, we were able to look at the nest that they left over. And I was fascinated because the nest they built in our bush was identical to the nest that I found on Google, to images that I found of nests on Google. And I'm like,
how do they know this? How do they know how to do this?
Exactly. What are they?
How do they know how to make a nest?
Yes, yes. And how is it identical? Identical. It's like, I don't know. It blows me away.
Yeah, it really. When I was a girl, I actually would sit in my parents' living room and watch the purple finches or the house finches, which are they're very similar. This is before I would actually read the book. I would actually sit there and observe what is going on in this nest and how they interact with each other, and the males and females. And one of the nice things about this book is we actually include kids on how to go about bird watching. So these are based on my experiences. And I think it's really important that you allow kids to just kind of say, look, we're just going to sit here for an hour or so and look out. We're going to be in the backyard. We're going to listen to the birds. We're going to look at what they're doing. We're going to look to see what they have in their beaks. We're going to look how they fly. And then we're going to talk about it. And every day it's like you encourage your kids to say, what did we see today outside our window, or even, walking across the park? And like, did you notice something that you haven't noticed before? I think it kind of gets them kind of slowly interested in nature. I could tell you about a crazy observation I saw in my parents' yard. They had this bedding. We had these mattresses, this outdoor bedding, and for some reason, the inside of it came loose. And the birds thought it was the greatest thing. We had this almost like this cotton synthetic material up the tree in the nest. I mean, who would have thought? These birds just loved it, but it was just so much fun to see what they're up to, like, every single day.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the fountain today. and to kids, it's almost like having a scavenger hunt, having birds and observing nature. I saw a bunny rabbit in the garden today. That's fascinating. Let's talk about it. What size was the bunny? What time of the day was it? But it's these little things that kind of like, oh yeah, I think I want to keep researching this, and maybe this is something I want to do as a profession, as a nature person.
Yeah, I like that idea of taking time at the end of the day to kind of reflect and help our kids reflect back on what kind of things they did, what happened during their day. And I think that a really safe and comfortable way to get kids to start that reflecting, that regular reflecting process is to have them reflect about one of the things they saw in nature that day. It's not threatening. You're not talking about, maybe a bully at school or whatnot. It's like, hey, what did you see? You saw a rabbit. When was it? Was it during the day, in the afternoon? Was it right after dinner? What was the bunny doing? Where did you see it? Are we seeing patterns? Are we seeing the bunny at that time every single day? Helping our kids become aware of their surroundings. And I think that that's not only a great way just to make them mindful about nature, which is a beautiful thing, but also just help them become more mindful and reflective about what's going on in their lives day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting though, because in nature, one of the things that they're going to notice is the males are a little bit more flamboyant, and then the females. And why is that? Why does nature do that? And a lot of it has to do with protecting the nest. Birds are great nurturers. And I think kids relate to that. They relate to mom and dad. Birds have moms and dads. When I was, a couple of years ago, I was absolutely fascinated by the Dahora eagles. And I could not believe the role that the males play in this nesting. And I would sit there for hours just observing this big eagle male arranging a stick in this nest, and to have that experience, as in nature, to see how the genders kind of relate to the nurture of this little itty babies in this nest. And I think once you kind of see it in nature, it's like, okay, well, let's go and learn about it a step further. What kind of tree is in it? What type of year is it? And I think what's the bird call? You hear that sound. Let's talk. Let's really talk about it. And then once they kind of become almost experts, like I know about robins now, okay? And let's go on to cardinals. And then they have this knowledge that, kind of to build on. And then once we do birds, I'm like, okay, well, let's explore mammals, let's explore the groundhogs and let's broaden our horizons. So. Yeah.
You obviously have a great passion for nature and birds. Where do you think that came from?
Well, let me tell you, I actually started out, it's a funny thing, I actually started as an English major in high school, in college, and I thought I was going to be a writer, and I am a writer. But in college, I really fell in love with science and evolution, and I realized that it was actually a part of my youth. Just growing up in my parents' backyard and observing this wildlife. Actually, it's kind of interesting though, because my first published article for Nature was when I was in 7th or 8th grade. There was a lake that needed to be saving, and I was fascinated by this lake in town. And I wrote an editorial on it saying, you've got to save our lake because it's a very important part of our community and our culture. So when I went to college, I had a lot of classes in evolution and biology, and I would actually go around the state of New Jersey studying ecosystem and bird watching, and I just fell in love with it. So I ended up at Cook College at Rutgers University, and to everybody's surprise, and even mine, I actually got a bachelor's in environmental policy, and to be a part of that community was kind of exciting. So this book kind of embraces my love of writing and nature and talking to different people about indigenous plants and birds and how to kind of create a sustainable environment. So I guess you could say I've come full circle in my academics,
Yeah.
in this book.
That's really fun. You know, as you were speaking about indigenous plants and you know, talking about some of the plants that are indigenous to the Northeast, like the sunflowers and milkweed, was it right?
Mm-hmm, milkweed, yeah.
I remember my wife; those grow all over our backyard and in my wife's garden. It was very frustrating for my wife because she would go out and she'd go, "Oh, there's weeds," and she'd be cutting them down. And then I discovered that the butterflies love them, and I thought, whoa, no more. Got to leave these up, and they're actually kind of pretty.
Yeah. Oh, and it has a beautiful smell to it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of people, they classify plants as two kinds. It's weeds and then they buy plants. And a lot of the plants that people buy are not good for your backyard. They don't attract the bees. They don't attract the birds. And we don't know this. You know, we don't have this knowledge. And some of these plants are actually kind of invasive, or ornamental. So that was kind of one of the purposes of writing this book. But again, unless we learn about it, unless we talk about this thing, this is something that we just don't know about because, you know, like I said, when we habitated our communities, we took all the indigenous plants away and, yeah, I didn't know about it, but it's kind of an eye-opening, kind of a very eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah. You were mentioning before the show that Under the Sycamore Tree is the first book in what you hope to become a series.
It's part of a series, yeah. And we're working on another book. I'm trying to get my illustrator to work on another book. It's actually going to be called They Call Me Corn Silk, and it's kind of taking a different turn. I still have to do the research for it. We're going to work with a little puny little owl named Corn Silk, and it's going to be a different one about emotions. So we're kind of going away from the sustainability to more emotional, but we'll definitely have some environmental aspects to it, and definitely have of the birds. But my inspiration is very local. Mm-hmm. I have a horse farm down the street from where I live. And I pass it every day, and I see the stalls. I'm like, oh, that's a great inspiration, great information for a story that I have. But we're still trying to find our audience. Barnes and Noble does an excellent job of printing the book, and you can actually buy the book through Barnes and Noble if you look up The Birds of the Backyard through Barnes and Noble and for your libraries. I'm actually very blessed. The naturalist that's actually in the book, he actually has this book at his nature center. So we're trying to get this book at nature centers, and the feedback has been spectacular. And I'm just extremely, very grateful. Another great resource that we have in the book, and I was so super excited about it when we got it, the Cornell Bird Lab gave us a piece of information. Seven ways to attract seven simple actions to help birds. So I called up asking for resources, and they're like, oh yes, the Cornell Bird's like, yes, you could have this link. I'm like, no, I want this book to be timeless. Could you actually give me the article? And they said, absolutely. So long after you read the story, you have these additional resources to kind of look back on and to kind of keep with you, for the rest of your life and timeless, even though my book is on ebook, it's Kindle, it just doesn't have that feel of having like a book and you're holding a book and you're close to you and say, yes, this is my favorite book. And there's a place in the book where kids can actually write notes, and there's an email address. So if you want to contact me and to cover the book, you can email me under Sycamore Tree Books, and I will send you additional resources. If you are if you have a camp or if you have a nature center, we came up with lesson plans. Backyard bird bingo is another, or kids to kind of invent their own birds. So I've been trying to work with nature centers and kind of, with kids and going outdoors and kind of explaining that we are the environment. The environment's not something that we go to. We are the environment. And going, on a nature hike is great, but even in your backyard, even if you live in an apartment complex, if there's a tree out there, okay, well, what's in your tree? What did you see in your tree today?
I love that. I love that statement. We are the environment.
We are the environment, yeah.
And I think that that's a great takeaway and a great thing that we can share with our kids is that we are the environment. And that's why it's so important that we care for the environment and make sure that we have a healthy environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And something as simple as picking up the trash.
Mm-hmm.
That's somebody's home.
Yeah.
That's somebody's habitat. You don't want people to trash your home. Well, why would you want to trash their home?
Yeah.
Chemicals, that we put on our lawns, that affects everything, pollinators and insects, we're all connected, and I think kids understand that better than we get. It's like, going to the store, they might say, it's like, Dad, don't use that because I heard it's not good for the birds, and they'll say something.
Yeah.
They'll say something, and you have to kind of listen.
Well, tell us where we can go to find out more about Under the Sycamore Tree and find out more about you.
You can actually find me on Goodreads. Goodreads is a blessing. So if you want to go onto Goodreads under MK McBriarty, I am there. I'm also on Instagram. So I'm on Instagram, Sycamore Tree Books. Let me look at Sycamore Tree Books.
Excellent.
But if you look me up online, if you look up MK McBriarty, you will find my photo and you'll find ways to get in touch with me. But I'm going to tell you, I love Goodreads. It is sort of like the Facebook of reading books, if you want to drop me a line, I'd be more than happy to, if you have questions about me or the book, or if you'd like me to come and visit you, I can, that's absolutely doable. But, this has been a great experience. This has been it's such a beautiful book too.
Yeah.
People tell them I wrote a book. They're like, okay, yeah, it's just going to be this cute little picture book. And they're like, oh, wow, what a beautiful book that you have. The illustration was actually done by my Aunt Terry, who's been an avid artist. And they're not digital, they're watercolor. And, I'm just so happy, to share this with everybody.
Wonderful. Well, we've had a great time speaking to the author of Tales Under the Sycamore Tree, MK McBriarty. Hey, MK, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guests will be Jessica Gold and Sanghamitra Dasgupta, author and illustrator of The Treehouse Story. That's the next episode of the podcast. Hey, if you are the author of a fantastic children's book, you may be frustrated at how difficult it is to let the world know all about your book. You might be really frustrated at how difficult it is to help your book stand out from the crowd of books that are published every single month. You might be sitting there going, yeah, crowd of books, yeah, probably 50, 75 books published every month, maybe 100 books. No! There are literally thousands of books published every single month. It is really, really hard to stand out amongst that crowd. Well, you don't have to do it by yourself. The Reading with Your Kids podcast would love to help you celebrate your book. There's so many ways we can help you. You can be a guest here on the podcast and sit down and tell the world about your book in a long-form conversation. Tell us about your inspiration, about your goals, what you hope your book will help families accomplish together. You can also submit your book to our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read panel. If they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a certified great read. You can also take part in our monthly promotion programs. We'll celebrate your book with commercials here in the podcast, with messages to our 94,000 plus social media followers. Display your book in our nationwide network of digital pedestrian billboards, and if we're taking part in a live event that particular month, we'll have you at our event. Learn all about these opportunities by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the author's Click Here button at the top of the page and scroll on down to our various services. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we're going to start by thanking our guest, K McBriarty. Please be sure to check out Birds in the Backyard Tales from Under the Sycamore Tree. Also want to thank our friends over at daretodreambook.com. Check it out today. Find out how you can make your dream of becoming an author come true. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Belcastro, Ashley Contreras, Mirabella Q, Rain Penn. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.